What's going on, everyone? Welcome to another episode of 100 Yards Football Sports Talk Radio. I'll be your host and producer, Logan Landers. And joining me here today to talk about the Dallas Cowboys and their 2025 draft class recap is the co-founder here of 100 Yards Football, a football encyclopedia, and our resident Cowboys fan, Vincent Turner, talking about his team today, talking about the selections they picked, and everything else involving the Cowboys and their draft class. So, Vincent, first off, how you doing on this Wednesday afternoon here in Georgia?
Cowboy Nation, is raining outside. Raindrops are falling on my head. Back to you, Mr. Landers.
Well, there might be raindrops outside, Vincent, but I know you're looking for a rainbow with this Cowboys draft class and sunny days ahead out there in Dallas in Jerry Land. But before we get things going here, guys, if you enjoyed the episode, like, follow, share, and subscribe. Facebook and YouTube, main two platforms there. But you can also go download our podcast every single week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or anywhere else you enjoy listening to your shows. You can find us there, just audio versions of all the shows we do here with the video elements. So, Vincent, let's talk about these Cowboys. They had a good bit of draft picks this year, and a lot of people were talking about them and how they can produce for Dak Prescott, for Jerry Jones, and for all the rest of the Cowboys nation this year. How do you think your team did?
I called it the common sense draft. Drafted players that we needed. It's a new coach in town, Brian Schottenheimer. This is his first time being the head coach. To be honest, I like the draft. We didn't do anything crazy. Jerry didn't reach for nobody. He took the best guard, Tyler Booker, who's played for a big-time program under Nick Saban over there at Alabama. Zach Martin retired, so hopefully Tyler Booker could come in and be the starting guard. The second pick, I like Donovan E., the air rush out of Boston College, a guy that has a lot of production. We need some help opposite Michael Parsons since DeMarcus Lawrence left in free agency. Siobhan Rivera, the corner out of East Carolina. Now, you and another gentleman that's part of one of the Yards Football, Mr. Brian LaBelle, did an NFL draft prospect video on him. And we all know that he was the number one rated corner before he tore his knee up third game into the season. If he's healthy, that's going to be a steal with the Cowboys in this draft. And, of course, Jadon Blue, running back out of Texas. Not a big guy, but when you're looking at explosive, 4.25 in the 40, I think 4.29, he ran some crazy. He's going to give the Cowboys stability that Tony Pollard did a couple of seasons ago at the running back position. So with the first 4 picks in this draft, I think the Cowboys did very well. I give them a B+. They drafted with common sense. They didn't draft all crazy outside their needs. And what do the Cowboys need? They needed help in the offensive line. Tyron Smith was not coming through the door. Zach Martin retired. They need to get help with Michael Parsons on the defense side of the ball. And Trayvon Diggs, playing corner for the Cowboys, is coming off 2, not 1, 2 major knee injuries. So if Siobhan Rivera is healthy, he's going to be a football player. And I love the pick with Jadon Blue. Getting them in the 5th round, that was a steal for the Dallas Cowboys. Back to you, Logan.
Yeah, I thought that the pick there, just talking about Siobhan real quick, getting him in round 3, like I say, you knew his draft stock was unfortunately going to fall just because he did have that ACL injury. And, a lot of people talk about that and they say, oh, that's kind of a kiss of death especially for corners, right? Because you got to be nimble. You got to be able to move quick. But if he's able to return to how he was playing there at East Carolina, then he definitely has a good, hopefully bright road ahead and a long road ahead. Playing with the Cowboys if he is healthy, but guy's an absolute ball hawk. Like you said, he can do pass breakups, he can get you interceptions, he can cover well. So if he's able to fully recover, which we all hope he does, then that could be a steal there in the 3rd round. Now, looking at the rest of this Cowboys draft class here, with Tyler Booker, like I said, safe pick, right? Offensive lineman. You're not going to, like I said, there's no crazy highlight films or anything like that, like with a wide receiver or quarterback, but you just need someone who's solid up there at the line, someone who can block both for run and pass, who can not, he's not going to just get pushed over. And look, if you're Alabama, right, you're going to be stout. You're going to be, the weight you are, the height you are, and you're going to have 6% body fat, if that. So I like the Tyler Booker pick. Like you said, you got to have some reassurance there, like you mentioned, with the retirements and whatnot on the O-line for Dallas that took a hit this year. It makes sense that you drafted an offensive lineman in your 1st round pick, and hopefully one that'll be around the league for a long time, like Dallas tends to do with their offensive linemen. They stick around forever. They have good careers. So hopefully Tyler Booker can have his name out there with a lot of the greats. But For Donovan there, the edge rusher out of Boston College, I like the pick there. I like that, they went to a school there, and with Donovan, he's a good guy. He's got great explosiveness, good first step. You love to see that from your edge rushers. We'll see if he'll translate into the league. But some of the other players, like you mentioned, Jadon Blue, running back out of Texas, I felt like he kind of got phased out a little bit at Texas towards the end of his career. Didn't see a whole lot of him for one reason or another. But whenever he did play, right, whenever he did get a lot of snaps, a lot of carries, he did produce. So I like that pick there. And we know Dallas has struggled in recent years with the running game. I know y'all picked up, I believe, Javonte Williams not too long ago to help out, hopefully. Jadon might be, maybe the next guy up. He might be, the backup. Who knows? But it's always good to, address the areas of weakness that you had last year and add on to it. And getting a guy out of Texas, someone who, went super deep into the playoffs and knows kind of what it takes. Plus, like I said, he don't have to go far, right? Out there in Austin, now he gets to play out in Dallas. So I know he's glad to kind of stay home and help out the Cowboys this year. Some of the other guys that they got there, we're looking out on the screen. Shamar James out of Florida, Johnny Cornelius, the offensive tackle out of Oregon, and finally Jay Toa, the defensive tackle out of UCLA. All guys who, hopefully that I like the James pick probably the most out of those three there, just because he's a lightning quick linebacker out of Florida. And I get Florida's kind of struggled here in recent years just with their, win-loss record. But like I said, with teams that have, bad records or who don't produce like a lot of people think you should, and going into the draft, like I said, you have to look at the overall individual, right? It's hard to look at the team. You have to tune in on the individual. And with Shamar James, I thought he did really well this year for the Gators. And obviously Dallas thought so as well, picked him in the 5th round, and hopefully he can develop into a solid linebacker for the team. But overall, I like this Cowboys draft class. Like you said, they didn't go with anything crazy, right? There's not any picks where you're like, man, you probably reached on that guy. I don't think so. So like I said, very common sense draft, but with a new regime in here in terms of just a new head coach, you're going to go in a sense a safe pick because you're going to have to implement a whole lot of new strategies this upcoming season. You want to have players that, are easy on the field, that can, slide into any system you think. And that's what Dallas did, I believe. And I like this draft class, and, we'll see how it goes overall, but I like the just kind of variety they have, right? They got a couple of offensive linemen, got a running back or two, an edge rusher, defensive tackle. They kind of went all over the board here. And that's what I like from teams who, so they want to get better. You go for different positions. You get what you think is the best at that time, and hopefully it'll work out in the future. But, Vincent, let's get your final thoughts here on this Cowboys draft class.
To Cowboy Nation, Jerry Jones used common sense in the 2025 NFL draft with the Dallas Cowboys. And before we leave today, George Pickens was picked up today from the Pittsburgh Steelers in a trade. I don't know if I like that move or not because Mr. Pickens is in his contract year and he's going to want to get paid. And we know when he wasn't getting the ball in Pittsburgh, how much a distraction he was. And I'm going to leave it at that. Back to you, Mr. Logan Landers.
Yeah, and that was kind of the big news that we heard about this morning of all times, right? You don't hear about a whole lot going on, but you have around 8 a.m., I think, this broke. And George Pickens now going to be the next wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys. We're going to talk about that later, though, because we do have a Pittsburgh Steelers draft recap coming up at 5:30 Eastern with Trey Sims. So we'll talk about that there. We're going to have our Cowboys fan. We're going to have our Steelers fan, so y'all can have a little back and forth on it and talk about it. But, yeah, my initial thoughts, I think that, with Dallas, you need to look, like I say, you have to have someone to pair up with CD. And George Pickens did some great work with Pittsburgh. But the one thing everyone says about him, just got to keep his head level. You got to keep his head level, and you can get some good work out there. And for Pittsburgh, they got some draft picks that they're going to hope to work around with the next couple of years. So, and they're still looking for a quarterback. That's still the main issue out there in Pittsburgh, even after the draft. So we'll talk about all that and more coming up once again, 5:30 Eastern is when we're going to be doing our Pittsburgh Steelers draft class recap. But for today, with our Cowboys draft class recap, I've been your host and producer, Logan Landers, joined by our co-founder, Mr. Football, Vincent Turner. Guys, stay tuned because in just a couple of minutes, around about 5 or so minutes, we have our Behind the Bench episode with head coach Jackie Sherrill. Of course, Vincent will be there, and Harper LaBelle as well. So stay tuned because we have a lot of great football content coming down the pipeline later on.